Hello everyone, and welcome to SUNUP. I'm Lyndall Stout. I'm standing here in a field laboratory where scientists study a number of things about wheat varieties, including how they respond to grazing cattle. Joining us now is David Marburger, our Extension Small Grain Specialist. And David, give us an idea of what you and the team have set up out here. What's this field like?
So this field out here is our small grains forage variety trial. So a number of the varieties that have been entered into the performance trials that you see around in the state. This is one of the locations where we are assessing forage growth for these different wheat varieties. And not only wheat varieties, but also a few triticale varieties and a couple barley varieties.
In addition to current varieties, there are future varieties out here as well.
Yeah, so we are actually examining some experimental varieties from Dr. Carver, some of more of his elite lines. Those are that if they can make the cut, they could potentially become a variety. We actually have a couple out here that are being proposed to become a variety for this year.
You and the team are out here with the clippers in the field. Tell us what's going on today.
Yep. So we've taken actually clippings at several different times, and we actually started on the beginning of the growing season. So those clippings there were to assess the amount of forage growth that we had throughout the early fall. And then at the time, we had actually come through after we had taken our clippings, and we'd come through here with a mower to try and simulate grazing, and then see after that, how do these varieties respond in terms of forage growth after that grazing? And so right now we're actually kind of taking our potentially what might be our final clipping date right here before first haul of stem, and where some of these varieties will begin releasing from dormancy and begin to really sprout up and really green up. But that's not to say that given kind of the current market conditions this year, with a lot of producers wanting to just go ahead and graze out, we may keep this field a little bit longer than we normally have in the past and try and assess forage growth for these different wheat varieties later in the growing season.
You mentioned coming out here and mowing. Why is it important to kind of get down on your hands and knees and clip at that level at this stage?
Well, we're trying to assess the amount of forage growth right now at this clipping. So we need to get to a spot at least that's going to be consistent for each variety. And right now they're just clipping right at the soil surface. That way we're trying to minimize any potential variability. That's the point of this, is trying to minimize variability between these different varieties so that we can make confident assessments when we say one variety might be a better forage producer than another variety.
What happens next? Where do these bags go next, and what do you guys do with them?
So we're going to take these bags to the dryer and we're going to dry them out. We're going to go ahead and we're going to weigh them. And then we're going to take that weight, given them the plot size, and we'll convert that into something that's useful for the farmer. And we'll give them an assessment of dry pounds for forage per acre.
And then that translates into planning for next year's planting and beyond?
So the current report that we usually put out is our fall forage report, coupled with our first haul of stem measurements for these different varieties. So when we get when we collect all of our forage estimates, we'll get that data plus the first haul of stem measurements from this year. We'll put that together in our publication that we can give out for growers who are going to help them making their variety selections for next year. Let's
talk about first haul of stem and where we are across the state.
Yep. So actually first haul of stem is actually creeping up a little bit earlier than normal, especially from last year. And I actually looked at some of the growing the heat units, at least compared to last year, and even here and even at Chickasha where we have this particular experiment replicated, we're about 7 to 10 days ahead of where we were last year in terms of those heat units. So because of that, you're starting to see, at least in the southern part of the state, where we were at Chickasha actually yesterday, a couple of those varieties that are early to first haul of stem, they're starting to release from dormancy. So for growers who are grazing and they are going to go out and remove those cattle and let it go to grain, now's the time to be getting out there and start scouting for first haul stem if you have one of those earlier varieties. If you have a medium to a later variety, you might have a little bit of time yet, but it is time to start thinking about that.
And then of course everybody's thinking about rain, and we could really use some.
Exactly. The rains that we caught in mid-January were very helpful to kind of get us through kind of the rest of winter here. But now the temperatures are starting to warm up around much of the state, and these varieties are going to start releasing from dormancy, and they're going to be beginning to grow. And when they begin to grow here is really when they're going to start using a lot of water. So we could use some rain because again, that wheat's going to wick up a lot of that soil moisture that we already have right now.
Well, good luck with the research, and we would love to have you back when all the data is complete to see how it went.
All right, thank you.
David, thanks a lot.
How do you use weather information? Do you just watch a forecast? Do you go by how cold or hot, wet or dry it feels like? Weather data from the Oklahoma Mesonet takes an added importance with the roller coaster weather we've been experiencing. Mesonet weather data lets us stay on top of how the weather is driving crop maturity and animal health. Even with the cold snaps, wheat maturity is advancing rapidly. On a map of wheat first hollow stem through Tuesday, the likelihood of early group wheat varieties having reached the first hollow stem stage had advanced far across the state. Checking for first hollow stem is recommended when an area changes from blue to green on the map. Once an area is red, the chances are above 50% that wheat has reached first hollow stem. If you want to harvest that wheat for grain, red means it's time to move cattle out of those fields. For wheat varieties in the middle first hollow stem group, the green and red areas were much farther south on Tuesday. But even for this middle group, we've seen a lot of advancement from last week. For varieties in the late group, the need to check for first hollow stem was showing up in the far southeast on Tuesday. Changes in temperature and wind caused a real swing in cattle comfort index numbers. On Tuesday, the cattle comfort index went above 80 at many sites in central and eastern Oklahoma, with yellow indicating mild heat stress. A map from Wednesday morning was mostly blue, showing mild cold stress. For locations in central and western Oklahoma, it was common to find a 60-degree swing in cattle comfort index from Tuesday afternoon to Wednesday morning. At Apache, the swing in cattle comfort index values went from 80 on Tuesday afternoon to a low of 11 on Wednesday morning. That's a swing of 69 degrees. At Weatherford, the swing was even more, 72 degrees, from 78 Tuesday to 6 Wednesday. Rapid changes in temperature make outdoor animals more susceptible to health issues. How dry has it been? Here's a map of rainfall over 14 days from January 25th to February 8th. Rainfall numbers were drops of water collected during foggy mornings. We actually have to go back 30 days from Wednesday to get any meaningful rainfall amounts. These totals were a combination of ice melt and rain from the mid-January ice storm. At first glance, a soil moisture map of the percent of plant available water from the surface down to 16 inches doesn't look too bad across the state. We see a lot of dark green colors indicating good soil moisture. But scattered throughout that green are lighter shades and percents in the 50 to 60% range. These measurements were from soils under dormant grasses, not from growing wheat and canola fields. Down deeper from the surface to 32 inches, we see a lot more yellow colors indicating drier soils across the state. With chances for rain ahead, we hope you get a good dose of needed rain, and let Mesonet's weather data give you a clearer weather picture.
It's almost farmers market season, and more people than ever are interested in buying and selling fresh fruits and vegetables and other products. For perspective, here's our Extension Community Development Specialist, Dave Scheidler.
So farmers markets are part of a broader phenomenon happening nationwide of this movement to go back to locally sourced foods. And that movement is being driven by a couple of different things, and farmers markets play a special role in that. One of the drivers of this is just a connection, a social connection between people. And so people wanting to know who grows their farms and rebuilding kind of the community fabric. And so the farmers market plays a unique role in that, because obviously you get to interact with the farmer or the farmer's family when you're at the market. So that's one of the things driving farmers markets. Another interest of farmers markets, particularly here in Oklahoma, is the availability of fresh fruits and vegetables. We've got a lot of places in our state that are more than 10 miles away from a grocery store that provides fresh fruits and vegetables, and might refer to them as food deserts. There are folks in Extension on the nutrition side looking at farmers markets as a possible way of providing fresh fruits and vegetables in those communities. So we're looking at it from that perspective. And then third is just the fact that it opens up a new market channel to farmers. So farmers markets typically have higher prices for some of their commodities, and so this could be a new revenue stream. But even if prices are the same between the farmers market and the grocery store, you're eliminating the whole distribution and retailing aspect. So the farmer's taking home much more of the dollar spent than he would if he's selling wholesale. So over the last 3 years, I've received a USDA grant to study the economics of local production. One of the things that we were finding is communities, really were starting to embrace this idea of a farmer's market, looking at it as a way of kind of re-engaging with consumers, but also thinking more broadly on the political spectrum, thinking of, maybe we have lost something in terms of the social connectivity in our communities, and so wanting to encourage that. The Oklahoma Farmers Market and Agritourism Conference is going to be February 23rd. In Oklahoma City at the Embassy Suites downtown. The conference is really designed to provide some hands-on training for vendors, so growers that are selling at farmers markets. So everything from marketing practices to actual ways of diversifying your crops to extend your growing season, and then as well as some safety regulation training as well.
We're in the midst of this year's spring calving season. It's a good time to refresh our memories about the 3 different stages of calving. We've talked about this in the past. The first stage being that takes place something in the neighborhood of 2 to as much as 24 hours prior to the actual delivery process. Stage 1, the big thing that's happening is the dilation of the cervix inside the heifer or the cow. Stage 3 of calving is that we hope will happen something around 8 to 12 hours after calving, and that's the shedding of the fetal membranes, the release of the placenta. And some ranchers may call it the cleaning of the cow. And if it doesn't happen in about 12 hours, then it's probably time to visit with your local large animal veterinarian about proper treatment for that retained placenta. That leaves stage 2. That's where really all the action is. And I think it's important that we understand how long stage 2 in a normal delivery should take place. And there's research data that helps us on this particular subject. Research done up in Montana and here at Oklahoma State University has looked at both mature cows, those that have had calves before, as well as first calf heifers. In the Montana data, they looked at 31 mature cows and kept track of the time from which they first saw the appearance of the water bag until the baby calf was delivered completely out on the ground. And on the average, in those adult cows, that time frame was only 22.5 minutes. In the case of first calf heifers, obviously that birth canal hasn't been stretched out with previous calvings, and so it does take longer. As we look at, again, the Montana data and the Oklahoma State University data, virtually identical. One of them 54 minutes, the other an average 55 minutes over quite a number of head of cattle that they watched very, very closely. Okay, this gives us then some guidelines as we're watching our cow or heifer during this calving season to see if we need to get her up and give her some assistance. In that adult cow, I'd say the rule of thumb is a half an hour. If she's not making real progress in a half of an hour, we better check to see if we've got a problem that needs some correction and give that cow some assistance. In that first calf heifer, then I'd use the rule of thumb of about 1 hour. Again, if we're watching her and she's not making real progress with each strain, then we probably better check to see if we've got a backwards calf, perhaps a calf that's just too large for her to deliver. Several different problems that can occur, but that gives us a guideline by which we can make the decision that it's time to get her up and do the examination to see what kind of help we need to give that particular cow or heifer during this calving season. And again, if you'd like to learn more about working with these cattle at calving time, I encourage you to go to the SUNUP website. Look under show links, and we have a link there to the brochure. It's called Calving Time Management for Beef Cows and Heifers. Gives you a lot of information about working with these cattle during the calving season. And we look forward to visiting with you again next week on SUNUP's Cow-Calf Corner.
Get your smartphones and tablets out. Extension Nutrient Management Specialist Brian Arnell has discovered a couple of ag apps that you may also find useful.
The Division of Agriculture is very active in releasing apps for your mobile devices, both Android and iOS. And right now we've had several new ones come out, plus several apps that we've released that work really well for this time of the year. One of them would be our ammonium loss calculator. This calculator was built to look at if you apply urea, giving certain soil conditions, temperature, soil pH, and wind speed, how much is the potential loss if it doesn't rain? A couple easy inputs: you put your nitrogen rate, your average daily temperature, and then your soil pH, put in your wind speed, and it gets you a calculation. And often you put your information in here, you'll probably be surprised about just how much urea, how much nitrogen you could lose if you surface apply urea without incorporating it via tillage or rainfall or irrigation. So that's a nice app as we're planning our top dress applications to decide, do you want to use urea and surface broadcast, or consider using a liquid application using UAN and streamer bars. One of the new apps we've released is Toxic Plants. This app is looking at if you've used a cover crop or certain crop species. Are there any plants that may or may not be toxic to the cattle or livestock you're grazing? And so you can enter this into this application. You can choose the livestock of interest. You have the cattle, lactating cows, horses, lactating dairy cows or sheep, and then look at the plants that may negatively impact that livestock. You can also just look at by plant and say, I have cowpeas out in my field that I want to graze. Is there any impact on said species with this crop? And so it'll tell you, is there potential for bloat? Is there potential for nitrate toxicity? And this is one of our multiple apps that was released from the Grazing Cap project that many of us in Oklahoma State and Kansas State are involved in. For more information on any of the apps that you just heard about, or more of the apps that we've released in the past, go to sunup.okstate.edu.
Kim Anderson, our crop marketing specialist, is here now, and Kim, prices have recovered from the past couple of weeks. What's going on?
Well, I think there's good news in the market. We did recover most of our losses that we saw 2 or 3 weeks ago. I think the real good news is that our forward contract basis for harvest delivered wheat in 17 increased about 9 cents this last week. Now, the lower end of that bracket, you know, the basis range was from a minus $1.07 to a minus 80 cents. That minus 80 helped pretty good. It now went to minus 77, but that upper level went down to 102, and our average, you know, our midpoint in that went down about 9 cents. And so I think that's good news as we're looking at harvest. That base is coming down. You know, I talked that if we had test weight and protein, that might be down around a minus 70. Pick up another 20 cents on that.
Let's talk about the latest supply and demand report and whether you've seen any surprises this time.
Well, it came out Thursday. I don't think there was any surprises. I think there was a bit of good news in there. They lowered U.S. Wheat ending stocks about 50 million bushels, but it's still at 1,139,000,000 bushels. The world, they lowered it 116 million bushels. So anytime it can go down, even if the world's still at 9.2 billion, still a record. Less is still better. You look at corn, they lowered the ending stocks on corn a little bit. That was expected. And so I think, yeah, minor surprise, but not much.
Before we talk about the 17-18 supply and demand in the marketing year, let's talk about what's going on in Oklahoma. We're in first hollow stem time. What's going on with producers and some of the decisions they're making these next few weeks?
Well, it's like we talked about over the last month or so. I believe there's going to be a higher percentage of our planted wheat acres that's either going to be grazed out, that's going to be baled, or it's going to be turned under and go to the summer crops. On the average, we harvest about 70% of planted acres. I'm talking to cattlemen. They're keeping those stockers out on the wheat right now. And so I think that supports our idea that we won't harvest 70% of those planted acres. It'll be less than that.
And then in terms of the 17-18 marketing year and supply and demand, what's all going on?
Now, USDA will come out with some numbers on February the 23rd. That'll be the first real estimates. I've looked at and put a pencil to part of that. You look at all wheat production, about 27 billion bushels in 15, 27.2 in 16. I've got it 26.7 billion bushels for the world right now. And our ending stocks on the world for 17-18 lowered consumption a little bit. I've got ending stocks staying about the same as they are this year, about 9 to 9.2. Looking at the United States on that, I've got the production for this year for 17 at 1.8 billion bushels. Now you can compare that to 2.3 last year, 2.1 in 15-16, 2 billion in 14-15. You look at ending stocks, I'd see them coming in about 900 million this next year, down slightly, and I think that's good news. Even to lower world ending stocks, lower U.S. ending stocks, 900 million versus 1,139,000,000. You know, you've got a significant, we're getting below that billion bushel level, and I see prices I've got right now at $4.75 for our average U.S. price. The Oklahoma price has been running about 50 cents less than that, but I think, you know, if these numbers come to fruition, I believe we could see $5 wheat next year on the U.S. average price. Oklahoma is slightly less than that.
Okay, Kim, thanks for running all those numbers. We'll see you soon.
Hi, welcome to Shop Stop. Today we want to talk about the flywheels, the small engines, lawnmowers, and timing issues.
So, you know, it's that time of year where we start mowing again, and you're going to go out there with your lawnmower and mow over Mama's lawn ornament, and suddenly the engine dies and you can't get it started.
One of the things that'll happen is it's got a key on the flywheel that actually keeps the timing on the engine correct. And I guess it's a good thing that you shear that pin because it keeps you from doing damage to the engine. But now you've got to be able to pull the flywheel and put a new shear key in there.
Right. And number one on the shear key is make sure you get the same one that the manufacturer recommends. Don't make a steel shear key for these engines because it does save the crankshaft.
The hard part is actually getting the engine and holding it steady while you're trying to get or keeping it from rotating while you're trying to get the flywheel off.
So that sits in behind this flywheel like this, and it's held on and with a nut. So sometimes these nuts are on there fairly tight, and it's difficult to get them off.
If you got an impact wrench, you know, it's pretty easy to use that. Or if you've got an older mower that the vanes on the flywheel are cast, then there's a tool for grabbing those, or you can actually wedge a pry bar or something in there to hold that flywheel and keep the engine from rotating while you loosen the nut.
But the new flywheels, as you can see, typically have plastic vanes on it for the engine cooling, and so it's hard to grab onto. We're going to show you a little trick on how to remove that nut without a tool.
What you want to start with is if you remove the spark plug from the engine and get the piston somewhere a little lower, away from top dead center, you can just take some twine or some string or something similar to that and just run it into that spark plug hole until you've got enough in there, and then as you start to rotate the engine, that will keep the piston from reaching top dead center, will essentially lock the engine up for you so you can remove the flywheel. Now when I pull on the cord, I've already hit that string, and now my engine is locked up, and I'll have a chance to remove that nut off of the drive shaft.
So you remove the nut, remove the flywheel, and then once you remove that flywheel, you can access that key and replace it and reinstall it, and then rotate your engine back the other direction from wherever you tighten the nut, and then you can remove the twine.
There's a tip for locking your engine up intentionally so you can remove the flywheel. We'll see you next week on Shop Stop.
Thanks so much for joining us for SUNUP this week. Remember, you can find us anytime online at sunup.okstate.edu, and also follow us on YouTube and social media. I'm Lyndall Stout. Have a great week, everyone, and remember, Oklahoma agriculture starts at SUNUP.